Maui firefighters have been through a lot. Some lost their homes and they witnessed the tragedy firsthand. August 8th was a tough day with fierce winds and fires in different parts of the island. And joining us now from Maui is Edward Kelly, the General President of the International Association of Firefighters. And thank you so much for being with us tonight. And you spoke with some of the firefighters who battled those wildfires. You just arrived on Maui today. How are those firefighters doing?
You know, we were very, very lucky that we didn't lose dozens of firefighters given the conditions, the horrific conditions that they were up against on August 8th. But I can tell you, talking to them today, their primary concern was Maui's a family, and their primary concern was all of their Maui family who have lost loved ones, lost homes. And, I think their hearts are really broken for all the people from Maui. But I will say this, they're resilient. People of Maui are resilient, and they will rebuild. They will rise from those ashes.
And Edward, is there anything surprising that you heard from these firefighters? Any stories that really stick out?
Yeah, I mean, what surprised me is they're pretty understaffed considering the industry standards. I mean, in Lahaina, they have 2 engines and 1 ladder truck with a pretty significant population. And the population of Maui has grown 9 out of the last 11 years, which puts more demand in the actual runs that the fire department has to do annually have gone up exponentially. So they do need more help there. Of course, the day of the fires, I'm not sure, they were completely David versus Goliath. The conditions that they were facing, like I said, we're lucky we didn't lose dozens of firefighters. In one fire, we had 2,400 acres burning, but there's only 10 engine companies on the entire island. So they had 1 engine and 1 grass truck to take care of 2,400 acres. So they were really up against it. And I know that I've talked to firefighters today that were in the middle of that firestorm when their engine started burning. And I also talked to people that lived on Maui that were so thankful for the work that the firefighters did. And so many people credited the work that the firefighters did with saving their lives. So I'm very proud of the Maui firefighters and the efforts that they made. And I thank God that they all survived those deadly conditions.
Edward, you mentioned understaffing. How many more firefighters are needed to fully staff that island?
Well, I know that there are investigations underway and they'll be looking at best practices. But when you look at the industry standards, and like I said, in Lahaina, they have 2 engines and 1 ladder truck, which equates to 12 firefighters. And they have high-rise buildings that, our industry standards in the NFPA would require 40 firefighters to be at within about 8 to 10 minutes of a fire, an actual fire. And they cannot muster those type of resources that they need. So we know that there's a need for additional staffing on the island. And I think we're going to learn a lot of lessons on how we can better protect the people of Maui and the visitors.
And Edward, some have criticized the Maui Fire Department for leaving that Lahaina fire. The county said it was 100% contained, but then the winds were really strong, so it got out of control. Just your thoughts on that?
Well, I know that they stayed at that fire for over 5 hours pouring water on it. And I know that fire can actually burn underground and then surface. And the conditions of that day, there were winds that were recorded up to 80 miles an hour. With the type of growth and the fuel that exists from the vegetation on Maui, I mean, the conditions were very, very difficult, to say the least. Matter of fact, it was, like I said, David versus Goliath. And our firefighters did an incredible job. And I think that the people of Maui know that. They know that it wasn't the fault of that terrible tragedy. It doesn't lie with the firefighters that risked their lives to a person for the people of Maui. And I know that just by being on Maui, speaking to the residents of Maui, they're all very grateful. Those that lived through that day know the work that the firefighters did was incredibly heroic, and they lived up to what is the cornerstone of what being a firefighter is, which is proving your willingness to sacrifice. And they put themselves in harm's way and they put their lives on the line. Matter of fact, one fire captain actually texted his family that he was going to die and that he loved them. But because the cell phone towers are down, thankfully that message was never sent. More importantly, God chose him not to die that day. he actually lived.
Edward,
Grace of God.
Edward, should they have stayed at that fire until it was completely out?
They were. Are you talking about the first fire?
Yes.
They stayed there for 5 hours after it was out, pouring water on it. So that fire emerged from underneath, they believe, underneath the ground, because what can happen is the roots can burn down underneath the soil. So even though they wet the entire soil down, those roots could then resurface, the fire can pop up. And with the conditions of that day and the fuel load that existed, it was a recipe for a real tragedy.
All right. And final question, what do the firefighters need? What are you doing to help them?
Well, we're providing peer support to ensure that, if they're having struggles and behavioral health challenges, that we have support for them. We also are providing financial support for those members that lost their homes, but they're also very concerned with their neighbors. They want, like I said, Maui is one big family, and they want to make sure that they're taking care of everybody that needs help. And, they are a part of the strength and fabric of the people of Maui is the Maui Fire Department.
All right, we're definitely grateful